Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on best practices for compliance and governance in teams. Today, this interesting topic will be presented by Jasper. As many of you guys already may know Jasper. He will still give a brief introduction of himself, but before we do that, let's move on to the agenda. So the agenda for today is the welcome and introduction, which is what I'm doing now. We'll move on to the presentation of the webinar topic, and then we will go on to the Q&A. There's a Q&A box that you can post your questions, and there we will either reply in chat or Jasper will do this live. So without any further ado, I will pass the word over to Jasper.
Good morning. So for those of you who don't know me, this is me. I won't bother you with my last name. I'm Jasper. I'm a solution architect at Inova Solutions, and I've been doing Microsoft for over 25 years now. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I work for a company called Inova since 2013. I live on Aruba, and Inova does not have an office on Aruba, so I have been working from home since 2013. So I'm quite used to that and using Teams or its predecessor, Skype and Link and whatever. So I'm pretty used to that. That's enough about me. Let's move on to our topic. I think it's a very interesting one. We did some previous topics on things like Teams, more from the end user perspective, and we had some webinars on security and stuff like that. And this is where it could all come together in Teams. So why governance? Why governance and compliance? Well, I'm an IT person, and my company, my boss, he assumes, and people assume that IT is in control. So that is part of the message. We need to be in control of what is happening with corporate data. And end user self-service, I really love that. But you can only do that with educated users. So here we are back again at PC literacy and know how to work with a computer, think a little bit beyond just pushing a button, have some common sense and some experience. So I will give you some numbers in a bit, but we really need to prevent Teams sprawl. You know, we can create a team for everything, for really everything, and then you end up with an endless list of teams, and that is probably not going to improve collaboration, security, productivity, probably not. We also have to look a little bit on sharing. Hey, you can invite people into your teams, external people into your teams, and then share content. We really have to look at how far, to what extent do you want to allow that to happen. And finally, we also need, I will call it hygiene. It's a decent word for clean up your mess. So if you're done with the team, if the project is closed or whatever, clean it up, you know? And the same applies to well, I come to that later. So we need some, this is what happens if you don't do it. This is out of our own tenant. So hey, Inova Solutions is a very ordinary company, and these are our current numbers. We have 102 teams. We have about 40 users, so that gives you some context. But out of those 102 teams, we have 70 teams with just one member. Really? Yeah, 17 teams with one member. I don't think that makes sense. Then we have a couple of teams with just 2 or 3 members. You should really ask yourself, is it then worth it to create a team for that? Or can you just do with 2 members? You can do a one-on-one chat or whatever. And then we have 28 teams with no activity for the last 6 months. So this is what can happen if there is no governance in place. And of course, governance, we called the title of the webinar is governance and compliance, but governance is the logical first step towards compliance. You first have to make sure that everything is in place before you can even start talking about compliancy. So this is really high over why we need some governance in when we start working with teams. And I'm not going to make it too technical, but we have to realize some stuff. If you create a team, there's a lot of stuff being created in the Microsoft 365 platform, because Teams is really built on top of that. It leverages a lot of different parts of the Microsoft 365 platform. So you create a team, that's obvious, but also you create an Office 365 group. And the person who creates the team will be the owner of that group, and then that person can add members or remove members, can make members owner as well. So that is a security feature, a security group within Office 365, within the Microsoft 365 platform. Then in the background, a SharePoint site is being created. So every now and then I call Teams the new front end for SharePoint, because hey, Teams works so intuitive, easy for users. I think it's way easier than SharePoint. So hey, just use Teams, put your files in there and share them. And but in the background, we still have a SharePoint site. Each team will create an Exchange mailbox and a calendar. So this is what happens as soon as you hit the button Create Team. And then during the life cycle of a team, you may add tabs and apps into your team or into your channel, like Power BI connectors. You may add Planner or Tasks or Stream or OneNote or whatever. So during the life cycle of the team, you create a lot of other stuff in that Microsoft 365 platform. So there's a lot of different aspects to what you actually do when you create a team. Then I think it's relevant to have a quick look, and I'm not going to read all of this, a quick look at where does it all sit. So you type a message in Team. Where does that message end up? Well, it ends up in some Azure storage, and then it will be ingested into Exchange, because we have this feature called e-discovery throughout the Microsoft 365 platform, so that we can be compliant. It has to sit in some platform where that e-discovery and compliance tool set will work. Well, that will work in Exchange, it will work in SharePoint, and it will not just work in that storage that is where initially the chat messages are sitting. When we look at files, if you upload a file in a team or share a file in a team, it will end up in SharePoint. If it's a person-to-person chat and you send the other person a chat, it will end up in OneDrive. So that is where your files are going. Then a couple of obvious things, your calendar meetings will end up in mailboxes in Exchange, contacts come out of Exchange, voicemail will end up in your individual mailbox if you have voice enabled in Teams. So from this slide and the previous one, you can imagine that there's a lot of parts that are being touched by Teams. Teams is really like a shell, a blanket, all over the Microsoft 365 platform. So as I already said, Teams actually, for the larger part, is SharePoint. So each team will create a SharePoint site. And this is a screenshot of the SharePoint Admin Center. And out of those 102 teams that we have, I also have 102 Teams sites sitting in SharePoint. This is just a list of them, but hey, it's there. They are there. And when we talk about sharing, This is the also in the SharePoint Admin Center. This is where you define, where you set your overall sharing policy. So if we put those sliders here on SharePoint and OneDrive completely to the bottom, then the overall setting for the whole tenant, SharePoint and Teams, is that you cannot share anything externally. No matter how hard you try to share something from within Teams, it's not going to happen. So these are the overall settings. And then I can set it over here to most permissive, so anyone can share. And then within Teams or within individual SharePoint sites, I can tighten that up again. I can say, no, for this site, this is a management site, so only people from the management team have access to this. But then I start at the highest level with the most permissive, access on sharing files and folders. But it's also over here, we need to have some hygiene, clean up your mess. So you share a file with an external person, with a guest, a customer, or a partner, or a relation, or whatever. So how long are you keeping that share alive? Most of the time we just forget about it, you know? It's like inviting people to dinner. You share your food with them. And what do you do when the guests leave? You do the dishes, you clean up. No, we are lazy end users. We don't do that. We share and we forget about it. And in the end, again, these are numbers out of our own tenant. We have over 700 guests account in our tenant. Because over time, we shared thousands of files through Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. And nobody ever cleans it up. So guess who has to clean it up? Probably IT. And then I think, yeah, but it shouldn't be like that. You know, I'm not a cleaning person. I'm also not a doctor. I'm not a cleaning person. So really it's about educating users or using policies and governance and compliance to restrict that. Yes, you can make a share, but it will only be valid for 30 days. I mean, the tools are there. We can do all of that. So let's have a look in the Teams Admin Center on governance, on permissions, and what can you do. So external access is really about chat and voice. So can you communicate with people outside of your organization? People who are on Skype for Business or on Skype or on Teams, but in another organization? Or do you want to allow that people can only call their colleagues? That's a choice. So this is what we call external access. That only has to do with, again, with the real-time communication like chat and voice, including video, of course. Then the next one is on guest access. So guest is actually within a team, allowing those guests to access the files and folders that you create in your team. So this is where those SharePoint permissions come in to validate if you are allowed to share a specific file with a specific guest user. So here it becomes pretty, well, not tricky, but this is really something you should think about when deploying Teams. And it's always very difficult to start with everybody can do everything, and then after half a year you have to pull back those privileges that you already gave out to users. So don't put everything open. What else have we here? This is a nice one as well, where I think, oh, do we want that? So, you know, people share. Users will find their way to share what they think they need to share. So They might use Citrix files or Dropbox or Box or Google Drive or whatever. And you can even add those storage providers into your Teams as a tab. So instead of putting it in SharePoint, you can put all the files of a team into Dropbox. Remember on my first slide, I said something, IT is assumed to be in control. Well, if I allow my users to put their stuff in Dropbox, I don't have the feeling that I'm in control. So if files in Dropbox or Google Drive get compromised and my CEO comes to me and he said, huh? And I said, yeah, well, don't look at me. I'm not the one who put the files in there. Those are your users. But that's, so think about that. If on all those little buttons, think if you want to allow that or not. And think about if you want to do that on an organization level or on a group level or maybe even on an individual level. Don't go there, don't do stuff on individual levels. Keep it on security groups, that's easier to manage. But it's things to think about. Then we have a lot of apps. You can add apps into Teams, either on tabs or in the app bar on the left-hand side of the screen. And also here, apps have a tendency to connect to other data sources, maybe outside of the IT control. So in this portion of the Teams Admin Center, it's also relevant to distinguish, hey, do we allow people to put corporate data in other storage things? I mean, let's look at something like MeisterTask. I think that's a nice little project management tool. Hey, but if you put your data in there and you upload documents in there, that means, are they still under control of IT? So there is no one best way of doing it, but you have to realize that it may have an impact. It always has an impact. Then we have a lot of features out of your Office 365 or Microsoft 365 subscription. Most of them we had other webinars around them. So multi-factor authentication, I mean, these are just features that come out of the platform, but they work for Teams as well. You can have multi-factor authentication for opening Teams. You can have your identity protection for your users. You can set up conditional access to prevent accessing Teams from certain locations or from certain devices or stuff like that. The advanced threat protection safe well. So that means that every hyperlink that is put in Teams will be checked on the moment you click on it to see if that ends up on a safe website or a not safe website. The last webinar that I presented a month ago was all about data leakage prevention. That works in Teams as well. So if you have a team, especially with external guests, then you can prohibit putting in credit card numbers over there, stuff like that, because hey, then that is all about data leakage prevention or social security numbers. They should not sit in a team where external users have access as well. Retention policies. Retention is getting more and more important. Retention just means how long do you keep stuff? You know, in general, over the last 20, 25 years, we keep everything. We keep everything. I do file server migrations, and files that are 15 years old are still sitting in that file server. You even make backups of them. That makes no sense. So it's time to start applying retention policies and defining, hey, how long should we keep this? Because it really doesn't make sense to keep everything forever. That is just not working. So retention policies in SharePoint and Exchange. Then we have our good friend Azure Information Protection. hey, if you use Azure Information Protection, that is that principle where the encryption and the access control lists sit in the actual Word document, for example. So wherever the Word document travels, be it in an attachment, be it shared, be it on a USB device, as soon as you try to open the Word document, you need to authenticate. If you use Azure Information Protection for your files, then the usage of things like Dropbox and Box and whatever and email attachment, that's fine because the protection sits within the document itself, not on the location, but it sits in the document itself. So that is really a very good way to protect confidential corporate data. And of course, we can audit everything. Be careful over there because we can really audit everything. You don't want to enable that because then we really get like very large files, but we can audit every mouse click that a person makes in Teams. But sometimes auditing is really necessary and really get back into that audit trail if something bad happens. How could that have happened? Who did that? You better be careful as a user, but also as an admin. Don't audit too much. I always make a little bit fun of the people from the big accountant firms where they say you have to audit everything, and then I say, yeah, that's fine, but then I'll give you 15 terabytes of data every week, and then you have everything. Have fun with it. So it's not doable anymore to audit everything, but the option is there. So a thing to get it a little bit streamlined is you can use templates. So you disallow each and every user to just create teams. No, they can create a team, but you predefine templates they can choose from. And the nice things about templates, of course, is that all kind of settings and policies, you can bake them into the template. So you are sure that IT is in control. So the sharing policies can be part of the template. Who can deploy the template? So the permission is part of the template. Ownership and membership can be part of the template. So the membership of the Office 365 group. You can define that in a template. Oh, there we have it, the Office 365 groups. Which apps and tabs will you make available within the template? Meeting policies, can you share content with external people? Can external people share content? Can they take control over your screen? All those little nifty settings, you can all define that in templates, and that would be a very, very good way to start the journey into governance, to start deploying those templates. And then that will take some time, especially if you're already onboarded on Teams for a longer period, let's say a year, then you're probably already having quite a nice mess in there. That's fine. Start deploying your templates right now, start cleaning up, and then a year from now you will have a nice, clean, controllable environment. It's not something that can be done within 3 weeks if you're already a year down the road. So the cleaning up, that is an important thing. So you have to realize if you delete a team, you delete the team, but you also delete the Office 365 group, and you also delete the SharePoint site, and you also delete the Exchange mailbox and the calendar. And then all the connected apps that during the life cycle of that team were added into there. But what the heck? What about your content? Who is responsible? Because it's all gone. So here, governance and compliance is very, very relevant. And I really believe in self-service, so I will allow my users to create teams, and I will allow my users to delete teams, but then they have to be educated. They have to know what happens to your content. So if you created a team for a specific project, once the project has been delivered, when the project is done, maybe those files should be moved to another location so that you can safely delete the team. But the files in there, hey, they might be relevant. They should be stored in some document management system in SharePoint, but not in the team site, but in another site in your document management system. So the cleaning up is not just deleting it. The cleaning up is also archiving and making sure that the relevant portion out of those team sites are being safeguarded. Because if you just hit delete, it's gone. And lucky for us, if you do it like that, we call that a soft delete. And we have a 30-day recycle bin where an admin can go in. So if somebody accidentally does that, they can always call IT and say, hey, I accidentally deleted the team. Can you please restore that? So that can clean it up first. And there is an option, I'm not a big fan of that, to archive a team. So everything will still be there, but it will be read-only. So the SharePoint site will turn into read-only, Exchange will put into read-only, and it will be hidden. So you can still show it up in Teams by clicking on Show Me the Hidden Teams, but they are so-called in an archived state. I don't think that's the same as really hygiene. You still need to clean them up eventually. So remember that. So it's not just deleting teams. That's not good enough. Then you throw away probably way too much, and then afterwards you're thinking like, oh, where did I put that? Oh, I put that nowhere. So yeah, and then it's gone. So be careful with deleting teams, but you must do it every now and then. Well, that was exactly in 28 minutes. So let's jump into the Q&A. I'm looking outside now a little. What do we have published? Do you have information on training education classes? Oh, yes, I have plenty of information for you. So drop us an email and I can send you a whole list of where you can start or follow the official trainings. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, so I can deliver on the admin side all of the trainings concerned to Microsoft 365 or Teams or Exchange Online or whatever. So there's plenty of resources out there on the web. Google is your best friend, or whatever search engine you use. So there is a lot out there. Anything else? Anyone else? Please keep them coming. Well, thank you. But that is easy for you to say, Adriana. You're my colleague, so I wouldn't expect anything else.
Hey, no, but I was meaning that I don't think there's a lot of questions because the presentation was very clear.
Yep.
But let's give.
I see Jonathan here. Jonathan always has the good questions. Hello, Jonathan. Is there a way to prevent sharing from within a particular team as opposed to disabling? Yes, there is definitely. So your overall tenant sharing policies are in the SharePoint admin center. So if you disable sharing over there, it's disabled in Teams as well. So that is the overruling setting. But if you loosen it up in the SharePoint Admin Center, you can tighten it up again on a per team level basis. So you have to put it wide open at the top and then granularly shut it down the deeper you go into your organization. So the answer is yes.
I see another person who's asking, who should be involved in the governance team?
That's a good question. Who should be involved? Well, I think if I put it very bluntly, I would say the business. So the same applies for security as well. Who is, I mean, in my opinion, IT can facilitate, but IT is not in charge of the business. So who am I as an IT manager to prohibit my colleague Adriana over here on what she can and cannot do? So it must come from upper management to make those statements, those policies, and then it's up to IT to implement them and to enforce them. And of course, with the current state of technology, it's also up to IT to inform upper management of the possibilities and the capabilities. But IT is not the department to make compliance, security, and governance policies. That is up to the business to do that. I always have to laugh a little bit when I take a Microsoft exam, because in Microsoft exams there will always be a question that starts with the sentence, the written policy of your company states blah blah blah. I know very few companies that have written policies in place. It's just, most of the time it's just the IT department that thinks, oh well, let's do it like this, and they push some buttons, and yeah, the business accepts or not, and then we have arguments and discussions and whatever. It should be the business who decides on that.
All right, thank you, Jasper. Then we have another from Mr. Fingal. What do you have to do to safeguard the content for audit reasons, but outside the team's environment? Oh, that's a good one.
Let me read that as well. Where can I find that? Is that still a new one? No?
It's published in the Q&A.
Yep, let me check that.
All right.
What do you have to do? Well, I mean, if again, as soon as, let's say in general, as soon as a user, if you don't have security and stuff like that in place, a user uses email and put in an attachment, and that attachment sits in your file server. So as long as that file sits in your file server, you are in control. Auditing, you can see who created the file, who edited the file, that whole history. That is pretty basic Microsoft Windows Server tools that you have available. But as soon as that document sits as an attachment in an email and it is sent outside, you're gone. You have no clue what can happen with that attachment. It's on the World Wide Web, you know, it's everywhere. So that's very hard. But the thing I mentioned earlier, like 10 minutes ago, on Azure Information Protection, with Azure Information Protection, I can protect documents on an enterprise level. I can protect those documents, and I can track them wherever they go. So that would be the perfect solution for safeguarding corporate content with some confidentiality criteria in there, that you apply Azure Information Protection to those files, and then you are in control, auditing and tracking wherever the file goes. It's no longer dependent on your tenant or your file server or your SharePoint environment.
Okay, and then we have, I think, the last question, and this person is asking, what is the best practice on the use of hidden channels?
Yeah, that is a bit outside of the scope for this. Actually, I was when they announced that, I was really wondering, like, yeah, so who needs that? Then you create a team, you know, as in a team. So we are all members of the same team, but then 3 of them can have a hidden channel within the team. So I'm not clear about the use case of that. So I'm also not really clear on best practices. It can be handy to have a side conversation, but you can also have the side conversation in a private chat. So that doesn't necessarily, well, for maybe for compliance reason, you want to have the side conversation in the team, then you have a valid reason. But for me, the hidden channel is really something like, okay, I won't use it unless I find a very good reason to do so.
Okay, thank you for answering those questions, and thank you everyone for all these questions. Let me see, we are giving another 15 seconds just to see if anyone else has any other questions. If not, I'm going to start wrapping up this this amazing webinar. Jasper, thank you so much for delivering your knowledge with us and with all our attendees. I encourage everyone to follow us on our social media. So you are updated on the newest activities that we're doing. One announcement that we're really excited about is we will roll out a new activity every Wednesday, and it's around, it's an online walk-in session, and you can ask questions about Microsoft Teams. So I will put in the chat the link where you can find more information on. Let me see. I see one question, one final question of Mr. Fingal. I'm gonna read it out to you, Jasper, so you can answer it. So the question is more in the sense that Teams is a collaboration tool that places content in different places, SharePoint Exchange, OneDrive, etc. Is there a function that you can click where Teams automatically retrieves information from all over the place and archives it?
No,
Thanks, Fingal, for the question.
no, there is not, because that is not how the platform is built. I mean, SharePoint is a totally different concept than mail items in a mailbox, or a calendar item in a mailbox, or a contact item in. So there is no way of doing that. So when you clean up a team, you really have to look at what is really the relevant content of that team. I think you will find most of it being files and folders. So most of it will be sitting on SharePoint. Because meetings that occurred in the past, hey, in your individual calendar, they will still be there. They will just not, the Teams calendar will be removed, but your personal calendar will be there. So you will have the invitation of the meeting in your personal calendar, and the email invitation as well. So, but no, there is no such thing to retrieve and archive. Hey, a smart guy could script it. But I don't think that's the way to go. Then we're talking more about document management and information management.
Okay, so I repeat, I encourage the ones that are interested in getting answers to your quick question on Teams, come to our walk-in session every Wednesday starting of next week. Like, for example, Mr. Fingal, I think you will be one to be in that walk-in session, seeing all the questions, all the good questions that you have, and we can help you further. Jasper, hit the next slide. So I'm inviting everyone to our next webinar. That's going to be the 18th of June, and it's about preparing your company for the future. So accelerating your working from home or working from anywhere vision and strategy. All right, it's going to be a very interesting one. We have our managing director presenting the transformation journey that Inova went through. and it's going to be very enlightening for a lot of people that are going through this journey now. All right, everyone, I see no more questions. I thank you for attending, and we will send you a thank you email with the recording of this webinar and with the invitation of next one. Thank you so much and have a lovely day. Thank you, Jasper.
Thank you. Bye-bye.